Hello firearms friends, Joel Colander here for Rock Island Auction on a cold January day, but here to warm the cockles of your heart with just one of the guns in our February 16th, 17th, 18th sporting and collector firearms auction. If you haven't been to one of those before, it's a 3-day gun show and it's the best gun show you haven't been to yet. Nobody's going to have the amount. Nobody's going to have the quality of guns. And technically there's a 4th day too if you come for our preview day, February 15th. That's a whole day to just walk around this preview hall and look at all the fantastic guns they have for sale. Come touch them, come handle them. You got to know what you're going to buy. Plus, it's just fun. It's a fun afternoon of handling a bunch of neat guns and talking to other people. So it's almost 5,000 guns this particular auction. And this is one of them. This is one of the stars of the show. And it is a little rarer than we know, but we'll get to that in a second. This is a Holland Holland. Now, it's a name a lot of us are familiar with, if you're familiar with shotguns and high-end hunting pieces, because that is what they are known for now. They make best quality guns, fine shotguns, double rifles for dangerous game, a lot of custom pieces. They are high-end. They are one of the world's premier manufacturers of firearms today. And this is no exception. They are finely fit, they are well crafted, finely engineered, they are sought after pieces to be added to any collection. But this isn't one of their best shotguns, nor is it one of their double rifles. This is a horse of a different color, and this is one of their paradox guns. Now, what is a paradox gun? Well, I'm so glad you asked. A paradox gun is a little bit of best of both worlds. It is meant for firing double duty, essentially. It's meant for firing rifle or shotgun rounds. And you might ask how that works. And it is by taking the last few inches of the barrel here and rifling just this section right here. It leaves you with a gun that's light enough to swing on birds and pick up, but its design is strong enough to handle some of the pressures of the larger rifle cartridges that you would be firing through here. And if you're out a little further away from civilization, as you might have been when these were first introduced into the market, having a gun that could take care of some dangerous game as well as a bird on the wing was quite an asset. So the origins of the paradox gun stretch all the way back to 1885, and probably a little beforehand, but 1885 is when the idea was patented by Lieutenant Colonel George Vincent Fosbery. And if you're paying attention, yes, that is the same Fosbery as the Webley Fosbery automatic revolver. So you can see it wasn't the first or last time that he was going to be combining designs in an innovative fashion. Well, Fosbery had spent some military time in India, no surprise there, being a British subject, and he wanted a gun that would do double duty. He wanted a gun that would shoot rifle rounds, and he wanted a gun that would shoot shotgun rounds. But that left him in a bit of a dilemma, a paradox, you might say. Because rifle rounds need, of course, rifling. If there's no spin imparted upon the bullet when it leaves the muzzle, bad things happen. You need the spiral for accuracy. At the same time, such rifling is terrible for a shotgun shot. If you're spiraling your shot down the barrel, it tends to throw a very wide or maybe even irregular shot pattern. So the two typically are not very compatible. So Fosbery put his own unique twist on the problem. I'm so sorry. His solution was best of both worlds. Like we mentioned earlier, he was going to rifle just the last few inches of the barrel while simultaneously using that space as a choke for shotgun. So essentially you have a rifled choke in these guns. It was enough to provide enough spin on the bullet, especially at the distances you were going to be using for big game, for thick-skinned game, especially with those slugs, which don't typically travel very far anyway. And it wasn't enough rifling to throw a shot pattern off or to make it exceptionally wide. And so Fosbery had himself a pretty good idea and patented it in 1885. He wasted no time putting this to the masses, and one of his first places that he offered it to was Holland Holland. Holland Holland wasted no time in purchasing the rights to produce that patent for 1,000 British pounds. By 1886, the first paradox guns were being produced. It's important to mention, too, that Holland Holland isn't the firm that we talked about in the introduction back in 1886. They don't have this just giant killer, super polished reputation at this point. they're a medium-sized firm. They don't have quite the clout of some of the major firms. They're far from a bargain basement brand as well. They're known for quality. Fosbery knows this. He knows some of the people involved at Holland and Holland. Feels like they can do the work, and he knows what he wants these used for. He needs that kind of market, that level of polish that Holland and Holland can bring. And so he approaches what's then a pretty medium-tier firm of Holland and Holland to produce these guns. It was the perfect choice, especially for quality, and especially would turn out to be important to Holland and Holland and really help them grow into a firm that was known for very, very high-end products. Holland and Holland would be producing these almost unrivaled for the next decade, coming in a variety of finishes, styles, actions, you name it, especially calibers. There was everything from what we'd call 28 gauge all the way up to 8 bore. So it was essentially the elephant gun at the time, you know, after we're getting away from some of the large calibers, 2 bore, 4 bore. Propellants were coming along nicely, so you could get away with smaller projectiles that were more focused on penetrating power, and the Paradox gun fit the bill. Like I said, they were producing these basically undisputed till 1899 when Fosbery's patent ran out, at which point the marketplace rushed in to also kind of capitalize on the novelty of the Paradox gun. It was quite a popular notion at the time. Most notably, the Paradox design was also adopted by competitor Wesley Richards, who produced 2 versions, a large version, small version. The large version called the Explorer, and for those into fine arms, you know that that's still a name the company uses today for their magazine and web publications. So very cool to kind of see these touches of Paradox guns from over a century ago still affecting how these companies do business today. But life didn't end just when the competition started. The Holland and Holland Paradox guns even saw limited service in the Great War, where they were purchased in limited numbers, of course, to do battle against airplanes and zeppelins, which why you would use, you know, a break-action shotgun when you have machine guns and semi-automatic rifles available to you. It seems a little distant, but there was good reason. What you could load these with were large incendiary rounds, so very good against zeppelins, which were just a terrifying thing. Like that it could just float over a city with impunity and just rain down death and terror. People were terrified of zeppelins, and so there was no shortage of ideas for how to conquer these things. Well, in comes the Paradox guns, where they were loading it with chain shot, essentially. You would load a shotgun shell with 1 thick ball, and then attached to it behind it were 7 smaller balls via a wire. When you would shoot that, it'd be a plane or a zeppelin. If you shoot it in an airplane, it's going to rip through the canvas, and then your slipstream is going to take care of the rest and just hopefully rip that plane to shreds and put that pilot out of commission. You shoot it at a zeppelin, it's going to tear through a lot of its canvas and hopefully make a much larger hole, a gaping hole, than just a simple single rifle round or machine gun round. So it seems silly to think of a break-action shotgun maybe taking place in some of these aerial battles when you have machine guns, but there was still a place for the Paradox gun even in the Great War. But even the Great War wasn't the end of the Paradox gun story. Holland and Holland brought them back as a round action in the early 2000s. Beautiful. If you've seen them on the Holland and Holland website or any for sale, sort of in the collector marketplace, they run 6 figures. They are every bit of the high end that Holland and Holland is today. And that basically brings us to the end of the Paradox's tale, or of its whole lifespan. So let's dive into the specifics of this particular Paradox gun. So if you were to see this Holland and Holland Paradox gun on a shelf, it might not attract too much attention. And I love that about it. I love how unassuming this gun is and how cool it is. And we're going to get into how cool it is. I mean, besides being half shotgun, half rifle, designed by Fosbery, the guy who did the semi-automatic revolver, service in World War I against zeppelins. Like, what? This is already a super cool gun. But on surface, it looks like a side-by-side shotgun, right? It's side-by-side, 20 gauge, side lock, really nice walnut stock. You got a semi-pistol grip here, checkered wrist and forend, some really nice traditional British scroll work on our side plates, a dark horn serrated butt. So this is a nice Holland and Holland. Of course, we have the gold accents on the screw heads. We have our gold safe indicator on the back. We have a front checkered trigger, these rolled edges on the trigger guard. Very, like I mentioned, as a gun that they anticipated you would use for birding. Very light, very quick to point. Just, you can almost flick that up. the only thing that indicates on its surface that there's anything different besides it's just a nice shotgun is you have leaf sights. You have leaf sights on the back here for 50, 100, and 150 yards, and yeah, it's probably about the most you'd want to use for a 20 gauge propelled round. And there is an unusual front sight. This isn't your typical bead on the front, and we'll get more into that later. All in all, pretty unassuming. But let's get into the rarity. Before we dive extra hard into the cool factor of a Paradox gun, let's talk about the rarity of something like this. So there are 18 Paradox guns made by Holland Holland in 20 gauge. I'm sorry, that are also hammerless. There's 27 in all, so you include the hammered versions, it jumps all the way up to 27. Hammerless versions, there's only 18. And they're made largely from June 1891 into, I believe, 1926. Most of those are post-1905 production, and that's because Holland Holland is going to begin producing a lot more of them in response to Wesley Richards' version. So we mentioned the larger versions, La Explora. Their smaller version in 20 gauge is La Fonetta, and so they don't lose any market share. Holland Holland begins producing those quite a bit more after 1905. This particular example is 1910 production. So of the 18 that are 20 gauge and that are hammerless, 16 of those are a Royal model, Royal designation from Holland Holland, meaning there's only 2 that aren't Royals. There's one that's a number 2 and there's one that's a number 3. If we pick this up, there are no markings on here that indicate that this is a Holland Holland Royal Paradox. The only markings are here back on the left barrel, which read Nitro Paradox. But based on the level of finish and based on the level of engraving, we know that this is the number 2 Paradox gun in 20 gauge by Holland Holland. It is literally a one-of-one Holland Holland Paradox gun. So it's about as rare as it gets. Now I know we just said that this is a 1910 production after the 1905 increase in production. But in my research for this book, which by the way was the book Paradox by Baker and Lake in the first volume, if you have an interest in Paradox shotguns, it is a wealth of information, the history of the development, the different versions. It's all there. Very thorough work. Highly recommended. Now in their book, this Paradox gun is listed by serial number. So how exciting is that for when you're just looking for information on the gun as general, to find one listed by serial number? Very exciting. It lists this as being ordered in November 1908, being received in July of 1909, being regulated for 20 grams of cordite with conical shaped bullets in nitro cases. There's a special order feature with a sight higher than usual. Assume that to mean the front sight. And if you look at the front sight, it doesn't seem very high. So you wonder about what an original sight would look like. And it was ordered for the not so kingly price of 57 pounds and 15 shillings. So here's where your unassuming side-by-side shotgun on a rack, just the cool factor goes through the roof. Not only is it all the history we talked about earlier, not only is it the rarity that we detail, the one-in-one from one of the world's finest arms manufacturers, now you're talking about it as shipped to Ceylon, or however you want to pronounce it. It's currently Sri Lanka, which is off the southeast coast of India. And it was shipped to Harry Story, that I didn't make that name up, that's his real name. And he was using it, specifically, he mentions in his writing, to hunt bears. The unassuming gun on a rack with all the cool history is now being used to hunt bears on an island off the southeast coast of India. If guns could talk. And what a treat it is to find out that it can. And it's only because a reference book that we dug into referenced another book that references this gun by serial number. So I'm really happy that that history isn't lost. I hope that whoever ends up with this gun in their collection keeps that history with it for a really, really long time. Because when guns finally do talk, it's a real shame if nobody's there to listen. Now, not to sound like an infomercial, but wait, there's more. If all that cool factor wasn't enough to make you want to rush out and place bids on this gun like right now, it also comes to us from the Malcolm King collection. If you've been watching our videos for the last year or 3, you know that the offerings out of Mr. King's collection have been sporting arms in the highest level of collecting, from dangerous game guns to fine shotguns, cased pairs, you name it. If it's coming out of his collection, it's a testament to his quality. And so in a way, the fact that this had kind of a surprise ending to it, a twist, that's not another Fosbery joke, I promise, that it had another twist at the end, is just, it seems so appropriate that it comes out of Mr. King's collection that, yeah, maybe it's not a surprise that a gun like that with such a cool origin would have come out of Malcolm King's collection. With that, and of course with new production examples reaching into six figures, at least on the Holland Holland website, if you're looking at some of those, you might expect a pretty high price tag on this. And you'd be right. We previously sold 10-gauge paradoxes for well into 5 figures. This 20-gauge paradox, one of one, all the cool history, estimated at $9,000 to $14,000. So we talk about sporting and collector auctions, and we talk about there's a lot of price point guns in there. What's a price point gun? This is a price point gun. It defines a price point gun. Where are you going to find a Holland Holland for $9,000 to $14,000? Where are you going to find one with the history, with the individually serial, like the serial number individual history that this one has for $9,000 to $14,000? Like I said, we've sold them before much higher into the 5 figures, or you can get new ones for 6 figures. Here's one for $9,000 to $14,000. So when we talk about price point guns, this Holland Holland is a perfect example of why you got to pay attention to some of the guns in our February 16, 17, 18 Sporting Collector Firearms Auction. You can view all the listings right now on our website, rockislandauction.com. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for listening to me gush a little bit about this beautiful old Holland Holland side by side. Until next time, keep your powder dry.